the recording of it. And again, just we are doing some show and tell. We're showing our questions to each other. We're sharing some of the things we wish we knew about that we don't. And we are grateful to all of you for doing that. And again, we're just recording. The webinars that we do are recorded for all to see, and we distribute those widely. The webinar recording is for our purposes to help remember some of the great points that you guys are going to make and some of the great learnings. In terms of the chat window, hopefully you can all see that chat window. So we have given, unlike a traditional webinar where the questions you might have or the comments you might have only go to presenters, because this is so interactive, we want you to have some different choices about your chat messages. So again, you can choose who you're sending the chat to. We would say that you would, if you want that comment to be shared widely, if you have a great website you want to send, or just a comment to hit all participants, and then everybody will see it. You can also just select the presenters and panelists if you have feedback for me or for our other presenters. And also you can send private messages to someone. So if someone asked a question and you wanted to kind of do a sidebar with that person and suggest follow-up, you can do that as well. The only thing we'd say is don't click on all attendees, because it sounds like that would go to everybody, but what that does in fact is go only to attendees and totally bypasses me and the other presenters. So I wouldn't actually know that you had even sent a message, and I wouldn't want you to think I was being rude and ignoring you or something. But I will cover that again once we officially start. And just to let you know, we're kind of a big group today, so if you don't mind muting your phone line just until you're ready to talk and just as we get started. You can do that if you go up on the upper right-hand side. There's a little picture of two heads, and that tells you the participants that we have with us today, and you can see your name, and there's a little icon of a microphone to the right of your name, and if you want to click on that, it'll let you mute yourself. And that is probably a good idea, given that there might be some background noise, and we are lots of people today. So let me check the time. Oh, okay, I think we should start, because we appreciate your punctuality in arriving today. And people might join us, you know, a few more people might join us as we get started, but we always want to reward the people who are on time. So welcome, everybody. My name is Fiona McCool, and I'm the Your Legal Rights Project Manager here at PLEI, and I'm your facilitator for today. Our web lab is on public legal education for mobile, and it builds on the learning and great information we got in last week's webinar on the same topic, and we're hoping it'll be very, very interactive. I just wanted to remind you about the PLEI Connect project, La Connexion Vige, and tell you about the project partners and remind you about them. I am representing CLEO today, Community Legal Education Ontario. The other project partners are Courthouse Libraries BC, and Brenda's here from that organization today. Hello. And we have Eduquelewa, and of course you all heard and met Hubert, who facilitated the webinar on this topic. The folks at POVNet are also a project partner, and they're responsible for the PLEI Connect website, and so we all enjoy working together on this great project. Our project is generously funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario and Department of Justice Canada. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Hopefully all of you have signed up and are aware of the PLEI Connect website, but it's a great resource for lots of very specific and helpful tips on technology and public legal education, and we're hoping that we can take what we learned today and what we don't get to. We can do that. We can keep on learning there and keep on sharing information. So if you haven't gone to the pleiconnect.ca website, I hope you will. I hope you sign up, and you know, if you have a tool that you're checking out or some question you have, we really hope that you remember to go there and share your learning and share your questions. So in terms of the webinars and web labs we've done so far, many of you have participated in those, but just in case you haven't, the first one we did was the challenges of creating and maintaining a bilingual website, and that was you can listen to a full recording of that webinar if you'd like to, if you're just sort of finding out about the project now. The next one we did was on web analytics that matter for your PLEI project, and that was trying to wade through measurement and Google Analytics and statistics and which ones matter and how do you measure and evaluate all of this stuff. And then today, of course, we're carrying on with the topic of PLEI for mobile use. So we're going to do a bunch of other ones, and we are hoping to use the PLEI Connect website to decide the next topic. So we hope you won't be shy about letting us know what you'd love to do another one on, and we're, as a group, we're always trying to find great presenters and good topics. So I just wanted to go through a couple of little tips for today. So there are two different technologies, I suppose, that you can see there on your right-hand side. There's Q&A and chat. And so Q&A is something when you ask a question, everybody can see it. So it's a little more formal. We used it in the webinars. Chat is, as it sounds, just a chat, like a running commentary. It's much more informal. So, I mean, you can kind of use either. I think what we're encouraging, though, for Web Labs is that people use the chat box mostly. So we've given you all permissions to decide who's going to see and what you send. So again, you can send a chat to an individual. You can send it just to me to tell me to speak louder or speak quietly or stop speaking, as the case may be. And you can also decide to send it to everybody. So if you have a message just for the presenters, that would be myself and the presenters I'm about to introduce, you can just click on the host panelists in that little drop-down. But if you'd like to send it to everyone, and we're hoping most of your comments you'll share widely, you're going to want to select all participants. And just to remind you not to select all attendees, because then it will go to the it will actually bypass myself and the other presenters, and we won't see your question. So maybe you could just take a moment. It's fun to do a little practice run. I see some of you have already started doing that. But if you could just take a second to say hello and let us know what organization and what part of the country you're joining us from today. So we see we've got people from Quebec and BC and Ontario and Edmonton, so PEI. So it's wonderful. We've got folks coming through from all over the country. And if you look over into the chat window, you can sort of see who's joining us today, which is great. So thank you very much. Okay, I just wanted to remind you that we have this tool allows us to do lots of cool things. And one of them is to actually, instead of just looking at PowerPoints and listening to talking and stuff, we can show or share something on our desktops. So if there's a website project that you're working on or an application you're inspired by or something that you do on your own desktop or laptop or your own computer that you want to show us, we can leave this sort of what you're seeing now, and we can actually go to one of your browsers or applications. So if this is something, we're hoping that our presenters who helped us on our last webinar are willing to actually, give us a little show and tell. So we're hoping the folks from Alberta and BC are willing to do this for us. I'm going to be calling on them in a minute. And I have some things I'm happy to share and show that I've been playing around with. So you can send me or the presenters a chat at any time and say, I got something I want to show, and I will call on you and you can get it all ready. Okay, so again, you can open up another window somewhere on your computer and hide any embarrassing things you don't want us to see, and then we can hand you the ball and allow you to share your desktop with us. So I just wanted to let you know that we welcome that, and we hope that you'll do that. And I just wanted to let you know who you're listening to and who's joining us today. So these are some pictures so that you can put a face to a name. So I'm Fiona. I'm up at the top there. And Ryan and Christy are joining us from Alberta, and those are the folks who have developed an app, and hopefully they're willing to show us some of how they do that today, which is great. Also reminding you guys to sort of, hopefully you could mute your phone lines because it sounds a little bit noisy in the background, if you don't mind. And also from Legal Services in British Columbia, we have Nate, Fraser, and John who are joining us today. So those folks have done some exciting stuff around developing mobile versions of their site, and I'm hoping that and QR codes and all sorts of wonderful things. So I'm hoping they're willing to do a little show and tell with us as well. Okay, so I wanted to kind of get a sense of why you're here and what you would like to discuss. I'm going to pull up a little whiteboard that I've gotten started, and I hope that if you don't mind, you could start sending me some questions or comments or anything that you might want to use or do in the next hour. I wanted to very quickly go over some what I think are kind of obvious things that people really wanted to do last time. So I was kind of thinking it would be cool to do a demo of Google Analytics, the statistics program, so that someone could teach us how to tell what percentage of users coming to our websites are actually using phones and mobile devices. We also were kind of hoping to get a glimpse of a demonstration perhaps on how apps are built and edited and maintained, and I'm hoping the folks in Alberta are willing to do that today. There's also lots of tools available online where you can do a test of how good or atrocious your website looks on a mobile device, and maybe we could do that. And perhaps some of you who are getting involved in QR codes, those are those cool, weird-looking little boxes you see on posters everywhere, and maybe we can find out how easy it is to create one of those. And then perhaps we could have a great brainstorming discussion about apps and that kind of thing. So if you Now, in terms of this particular whiteboard right in front of you here, the people who are co-presenters can type into it. For everybody else, you could put in some questions into the chat, and I could type them while you're talking there. There is a question coming through about whether there's any way to increase the font size in this application in terms of the chat and Q&A. I apologize if it's kind of small to read. I'm not entirely sure that's possible, but I don't actually know offhand if you can do that in WebEx. But I will try and read aloud the things that fly through in the hopes that we can make it as accessible as possible. So if you have any things to add for today, please type them into the chat and we will add them on your behalf. Okay? I also have some additional slides with just other questions I had. So, you know, because I have lots of questions too. We also have a point here about the option of building. This is a point from Mosa, who's the developer on the PLE Connect website, option of building an adaptive design using CSS and HTML5. So I will want her to talk about that so that I know what she means, and she can get into that. And those are all things that we hopefully can cover today. So I'm just typing that in right now. So it's never too early or too late to add other questions. So I know Hubert is also going to want to talk about point number 6, which I think is part of number 7, which is instead of working on your site, never thinking about mobile and then having to get a mobile version ready later, there's ways that you can build sites in the first place that make them better for potential mobile users. And I think that's something that we're going to call on them to talk about shortly. So I can keep going back and forth into that whiteboard in a minute, but perhaps now we could start with a demo of how to read your Google Analytics reports. I hope this is something that I'm not the only one that wants someone's help on. So we talked a little bit last time about when it's time to start thinking about creating mobile applications and or certainly having a mobile site. So I'm going to call, hopefully, let me guinea pig here the folks at LSS. So that could be John or Fraser, who might be willing to unmute themselves for a moment here and say hello over the phone. And I thought that I could pull up my own Google Analytics for the Your Legal Rights website. I'm happy to be the guinea pig here, and maybe some very smart people here on this webinar could help me roam through to figure out the answer, which is, should I be thinking about mobile stuff? Do I have enough users to justify it? So I'm hoping somebody will, is Nate there?
Yeah, I can help with that.
Excellent. Okay, well, what I'm going to do now is I am going to share, my desktop. So hopefully all of you in a moment are going to see, you were seeing the, there you go. So hopefully just let me know. Hopefully you guys can now see my Google Analytics, and I will go back to sort of the home page of Google Analytics there, and I'll click on my report for Your Legal Rights. That's the website that I'm in charge of. And maybe Nate can tell me where to click and look. There's sometimes a slight delay between what I see and what you see, so we'll try and go nice and slow, and maybe folks can follow this and apply it to their own analytics. Nate, did you want to kind of tell me where to click to figure this all out?
Sure, yeah. It's actually, depending what you want to do, find out exactly. It's actually quite easy. If you take a look on the left-hand side under Audience there,
Yep.
There's actually a little arrow that says Mobile. And if you click
I'll click on Mobile there. The first, yep, okay. So there, again, there might be a little bit of a delay. I'll go to Overview. Yeah. Okay.
First one there is Overview. Yeah, so click on that one.
You got it.
And then you'll see here no and yes at the bottom, which is basically, is it a mobile device or not that's accessing your site. The one thing to note here is that includes tablets too.
Right.
And obviously, from a design standpoint, when you're building a site, an iPad is going to be, well, it may not react that differently to, you know, an iPhone. The actual way people are going to process the information and see it is going to be different, especially considering different screen size.
That's right.
But yeah, and then you pull it up right there.
So if we're just using my statistics here as an example, I hope other people find this helpful. So if I'm looking at this green chunk of cheese here that says 19%, that's sort of telling enough that I ought to, would you say that a 19% rate is worth putting some effort into figuring out how to make it work on mobile devices?
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
I mean, everyone's going to have to, you know, take a look at their own stats and figure out how much time and effort you're going to need to put into making the mobile site, but you know, close to 20% or so, you know, 1 in 5, I think that's definitely a point where you want to start considering it. And
okay, that's great.
Yeah, see if it's worth your time.
All right. So that hopefully that was helpful to folks. When I was listening to the webinar, I was thinking that I think that was the right way to figure that out. But I'm glad to have had a little guidance from Nate on that. Perhaps the folks at in Alberta that developed the app, they might want to speak to what their statistics were telling them in terms of their decision to create an app. That would be Ryan or Krista, if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I was just going to add that you can also look at how your mobile traffic has increased over time. So I know about 6 months ago ours was only at about 10%, and then when I looked again, it was at 20%. So there's a huge increase. So I think that's something to look at too when you're deciding whether or not to go mobile, is how fast it's increasing, and just preparing for that sort of future projection.
Right, that's a great point. There's a question here about from someone who gets their stats from their own site system rather than for Google Analytics, and is the question of whether it's worth it to sign up for Google Analytics as well, just to kind of get this information that it's Google Analytics does or does not make it easier to figure that out than other site systems or more other ways of getting statistics.
It's Nate again. I like Google Analytics myself. I think it's kind of one of the easiest systems out there. If you're getting it through a different little collection stats program, you have to also consider that the stats you have before might not match up with the way Google tracks the stats. There might be some nuances where stuff doesn't translate perfectly over. I mean, I'd recommend Google Analytics, but again, you'll only be collecting stats from when you switch over, so there will be a bit of a disconnect between the two. Whether that's worth your time or not, you'd have to decide yourself.
Okay, thanks for that. If there are other questions specific to kind of how to tell if your percentage of site visitors, by all means send those along. What I was kind of hoping to do next, we talked, Krista and Ryan from the folk out in Alberta talked a lot about how they developed their app, how they decided to proceed with it, and I hope everyone who's joining us today has listened to or participated in that discussion. If they're willing, if Christy's willing or Ryan's willing, I was kind of hoping maybe I could pass the ball to you, so to speak, and you might be willing to kind of show us what it looks like when you come into your office in the morning and you want to make a change to your mobile app, and hopefully it won't be terrifying and intimidating to us. Do I have a guinea pig who's willing to show us what's behind the curtain?
Sure, if you could pass it to me.
Yeah, so what I'm doing right now is I'm passing the ball to Ryan Day, who's I showed a picture of him a couple slides ago from Alberta. So Ryan, you can go up to the top, I believe, and hit share applications. Oh, look at that, he's done that. So I'm seeing a green screen as he pulls something up there. And just to remind folks that any of you can do what Ryan's doing in terms of showing us something. So I'm hoping that you, if you're interested and you want to kind of show something you're working on, that you'll send me a message and I can pass you the ball too. Okay, over to you, Ryan.
Okay, I'm just going to go over a little bit of the background to making an app, and then I will show some of the tools that I used. So just to get everybody prepared to have the conversation of what all the different tools we'll be using, you need to know some words and some background information. So I'm going to start off. So there's my mic's cutting out, so sorry, I'm kind of distracted. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
I can hear you just fine, Ryan.
You can? Okay, great. Yep. Okay, so there's different mobile operating systems, Android, iOS. iOS is the Apple one, BlackBerry, and Windows. They all use different languages, and when you're making an app, you have to write it in those languages usually. But there's some tools to get around that so that you can make an app that will work across all the platforms. So the easiest way to make something that will work across all the platforms is to build a web app. So those are basically mobile-friendly websites that you can visit through the phone's web browser, and they're written in HTML5. They can use, it's kind of where it blurs between a mobile website and a web app. There's a lot of overlap, but a web app can use some of the phone's native features like the GPS or the camera. The other option is building a native app, and that takes a bit more work. That's one that can be installed on the phone, usually downloaded through the official store, so the Apple App Store or Google Play, and it's written in the language of the operating system. So we have a web app version and a native app version of our Ken My Landlord app. And what we found is that not a lot of people are interested in the web app, but there has been quite a few people that want to download and install the app on their phone. So that was kind of interesting to see. And I think people like that because they can install it. It's on their phone. They can look back at it. But a lot of people aren't really bookmarking websites on their phones. They're really into having an app that's there when they want it and can be accessed offline. So yeah, like I said, people want native apps. So the tool that we use to build the app, and like I'll give you guys a bit of background about myself. I don't have a background in any thing in computer or design or anything like that. I'm just kind of a geek that likes to test things out and play around on computers. So I don't know all the words. So if you do know the words, don't be offended if I screw them up. But PhoneGap is a framework. It's free, and it lets you write an HTML5 web app and convert it into a native app. So there's a little picture from their website at the bottom of the screen there, and it will publish it for all of the major phone operating systems. They have really good documentation. So what we did was we made an app in Dreamweaver. So I have Dreamweaver open here. They have a template. So we'll open this up. So here you can see what it looks like when you're making it in Dreamweaver. So here's potentially the app. So there's a feature in Dreamweaver that you can publish your app, and it's called PhoneGap Build. It's somewhere in here, I can't remember right now, but it's a good way to get your app ready to be used on phones, except it's missing a step to get it into the store. So you can use this to build a web app, Dreamweaver, and maybe eventually you'll be able to publish to the stores through it, although I doubt Apple would let you because they're very controlling about things. But anyways, you can start here and you can use some other tools to finish the job. So we built the bulk of it in Dreamweaver. Some of the things we found was that it's not always the latest version of PhoneGap, and it's not ready for the stores. So
and just to ask you a question there, Ryan, I think I can sort of see in case people are asking about what version of Dreamweaver allows all of this stuff. So that's going to be it says, looks like it's version 6 or CS6 or something. So if people have like a version of Dreamweaver that's a couple of years old, this might not be an option?
I think it goes back to CS 5.5, I think, but it's definitely the newer versions are going to have better support and more options.
Okay. I just wanted to, while Ryan's poking around there, I just wanted to remind people they may have questions while he's talking and they want to send a chat, and they may not be sure how to do that because we've left the WebEx, but we've left the sort of view that you had a second ago. But if you kind of put your mouse up to the very top, you can see that you can still click on the chat box, and then you will be able to have that little box up while Ryan's showing you something, just in case you have a point or something you want to add. So I just thought I'd pass that on in case you have something you want to chat while people are giving a demonstration. Sorry about that, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So anyways, like I said, we built the bulk of it in Dreamweaver, and from there we had to use the tools that the different operating systems have. So Apple has a special, I think it's called the iOS SDK, Software Development Kit, that you have to sign up as a developer and pay a $100 fee to get access to those tools. The Google tools are free. They use a thing called Eclipse. Xcode, that's what it is. Thanks. Somebody just said that in the chat window. The Google tools are free. They use a thing called Eclipse. So I'll show you what that looks like. It looks pretty scary, but most of the stuff you don't really need to use. So this is what it looks like. There's a lot going on here. But the neat thing, the Google stuff was pretty rough around the edges when we used it a year ago. And just in a year's time, things have gotten so much better, so that's really neat to see. The Apple SDK is really, Software Development Kit is really nicely laid out. So that's a neat thing to develop with. Just some, So I have a question here. Different manufacturers, Google or BlackBerry or Apple or Windows, produce different operating systems and therefore different browsers.
Yeah, that's coming from a question about, just a question someone had about all the different tablets and phones and whether they're using the same browsers and which one to look at in terms of the best one to sort of figure all this out for.
Yeah, so there's different operating systems. Sometimes they can have overlapping browsers. So browser and operating system are two different things. So it's kind of like Windows and Mac can both have a Firefox browser on their computer. So
right.
Hopefully that explains that. Just some quick things about our experience I'll go through really quickly. Okay, yeah. Just to explain a few things really quickly, why we chose Android. So it's the most popular operating system right now for phones. Tablets are catching up. The SDK is free. It's $25 a year to get into the store. No Mac computer required, which was a problem for us because we only have Windows computers. So we actually had to borrow someone's Mac computer to make our Apple app. Yeah, Xcode requires a Mac, so that's the tool that you use. And then the Google Play Store is a lot easier to get into than the Apple Store.
And I just had a question on that while you were mentioning the whole Android versus Mac. If your audience for your app is low-income folk or youth or service providers who have, don't have access to the latest or most expensive products, would it be fair to say that Android might be a better, if you can't do both, that it might be the better choice in terms of having an app that people are more likely to use? Or I'm just wondering what your opinion is on the whole Apple versus, because I don't know if iPhones are as common among low-income people, but I don't have data on that, so it's more of a question.
Well, when we did our bit of research, we talked to different intermediaries in Edmonton, and a lot of kids have phones. A lot of vulnerable youth have phones, but they're probably more likely to have older phones. And Android kind of runs the spectrum from high-end phones to low-end phones, whereas Apple mostly high-end stuff. So it's probably good to have it on Android for vulnerable youth, but I mean, the more operating systems you're available on, your information is available on, the better. The better,
okay. I saw a question that came through the chat here. The person described themselves as a newbie, but I don't necessarily understand their question, so that just proves how much of a newbie I must be. How did you get your phone gap build onto the native SDKs?
So the SDK is a software development kit. So each operating system has a software development kit. So I built it in Dreamweaver. The files I saved, and then I opened those files using the software development kit.
Okay.
So Eclipse was the Google one. I'm opening it right now. You can see in the left there's all of these things here are files, and I just dropped my Dreamweaver files into these folders, and there's instructions on where you would put them.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot.
The
Ryan,
other thing, yep.
yeah, just a question from Hubert here, sorry. How do you make sure that it works with all the versions of Android? Because there's so many different versions and different phones that work on all kinds of versions of Android, and I know it's always a problem for some of my friends that, you know, they have an older phone, they can't go to Ice Cream Sandwich or whatever the name is.
So when you're building an app for Android, maybe I can show you right now. It asks you what phones you want to build for. So if you're making a really basic app, you don't need a new phone to run it. So all of the old phones can still run it. So our Ken My Landlord app is not very complicated. So it's available on every type of Android phone. If you're going to do some really fancy things, which you probably won't unless you hire a developer, then you'll need to worry about the versions of Android and building it for different phones. The neat thing about the software development kits is that there's emulators. So that means that you can actually run your app on your computer and it will look like whatever phone you want it to look like. So I can tell it to open up the app as a Samsung Galaxy S3 and it will open up a window and it will look the same way it will look on that phone. And the same thing with Xcode, the Apple tool.
Okay, I see there's a Nexus 1 on the screen you just had.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, I can see. So is that where you select the different types of
yeah, so there's probably a couple different spots where you can set that. But yeah, you can pick different screen sizes, who you're going to build, what phone you're trying to target. You can also install it on your own phones or tablets if you have some at the office. So anyways, so that's pretty much it for the tools, and I see them getting kicked off. I'm just going to say one more thing that we had that I think is important is when we were making our apps, so we have native versions for all sorts of different operating systems that we made with the PhoneGap build, but the problem that we had was getting into the stores. So Google Play was very easy. They let us in. Apple was very tough. There was a really long process on getting our app approved, and in the end we actually didn't get our app approved. So we're still trying to come up with ways to get our app approved and into the store. And I'll just answer these questions really quickly. From, who is this, from Michael? So the PhoneGap build process, there's lots of documentation, and maybe I can post that later, that explains how you can take those files. Basically, it was just copying and pasting from the folder and dropping them into the PhoneGap, or sorry, the SDK kit.
I just wanted to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, there's one more question. And they did tell us why we were rejected. They said that our phone app wasn't complex enough, that it could just be a web app. So they wanted us to use more of the native functions of the phone, so the GPS or the gyroscope. So that's something that we're trying to figure out how to integrate in a meaningful way into our into a new app to hopefully get it into the Apple Store, because we're finding that a lot of people are stumbling upon our app by searching through the store and not necessarily going through our website or something like that. So I feel like we could get a lot more downloads if we were available in those other stores. So
okay, thanks, Ryan. I just wanted to make the point that Fraser reminded us that apps always run better in simulators. They look better on our desktops when we're building them, and since the phone's not as powerful, it's always good to test on the real thing. I think that's probably going to be a piece of advice for doing mobile-friendly websites too. So thank you very much, Ryan. That was great. And hopefully we can carry on some of the discussion on the PLE Connect website as well. There's also a question of third-party tools. For those of us who might have been terrified and or intimidated by how complicated what we just saw is, there's lots of tools, some free, some not, that lets you sort of build the app yourself through a website kind of application, drag and drop and that kind of stuff. I certainly found an article where a bunch of them were reviewed. I was wondering if anyone's used any of them and has any to recommend. So that would be, again, there's lots of tools for building mobile sites. I meant more how to build apps. So if anyone has any that they've used that they might want to send through the chat, and again, choosing all participants, we'll all see those. And we can certainly pass on lists of ones that get recommended over time to all of you through the PLE Connect website. So we could just, I thought we could just put that out there. Buyer beware. Yeah, I know. That was covered in the webinar, that some of these tools look better than they really are. Another topic was, we did talk a little bit about the kinds of statistics you can get on people using your app. I'm just concerned about the time and that we haven't really got to developing your website for mobile purposes. So although I kind of want to know about the stats you can get on your app, I feel like maybe we ought to move on to creating your mobile website, which again is a different thing and I think easier, but maybe I'm wrong. So I was wondering if we could, and I have a couple of general discussion questions there. I don't know if people want to jump into those or not, but I thought, you know, brainstorming an ideal public legal education app. I think one of the questions that the folks from LSSBC asked last time is, imagine that you're on the bus. What would you like your public legal education website to be able to tell you while you're on the bus? Or if you're out in the field with clients, what information on all of these content-rich websites that we all produce would be best on an app? So what do you need to carry around with you on your phone? And that sort of sounds like a good question to ask yourself if you're thinking of what to make mobile. So by all means, please send in some suggestions and chats on that. I had questions. I don't know if anyone out there has answers about the risks, whether they're in fact minimized or made worse in terms of vulnerable populations like abused women. If they have information, for example, on their mobile phone about safety planning or service provider information, is that better than them using a shared computer in the home to do that? Has anyone thought and or addressed that question? Anyway, just something to think about. And again, if that's not a topic that we have time for today, I think that might be a good one to pick up going forward. Our apps and or mobile websites, if that information's in my phone, you know, in my bag or my purse or whatever, is that a little bit safer for me than having people see what I'm surfing in other ways and covering your tracks and questions like that. So I was interested in this question of testing your site. I found a tool that I thought was really cool, dudamobile.com. It was Google supported, so I thought it might actually survive and last. But it lets you put your website, lets you put your URL right in, and it lets you kind of create what seems like a really easy to use free mobile version of your site right on the fly. And you can move things around and shorten the names of your various you know, headings and so on, and it sort of shows you how your site looks on 5 or 6 devices. I know from the folks who remind us, the programmers among us who say, you know, just because you've tested on a website doesn't mean that it looks actually that good on the real thing. But this certainly simulates a whole bunch of different platforms. I found it really easy to use. I'm happy to give a demo, but I also don't want to give a demo if people don't think that would be helpful. Does anybody is anyone interested in taking a gander at what that looks like? Or not? Okay. Let's see. I have a Hubert, do you have your hand up? I'm seeing a check mark next to you. Oh, Fraser reminds us that a simulation is still awesome. So perhaps until I'm told otherwise, if we have a little bit of time, I could pull that up and share my desktop, and perhaps we could put in the PLE Connect website and see how it looks. And of course, Mosa is with us, who knows tons about this, and she could probably better than me indicate what's wrong with this tool. But I sort of stumbled upon it after last week, and I thought, oh, maybe I should find out how my site looks. And I started building a version of my site, and I think I wouldn't be comfortable doing it in Dreamweaver, so this seemed really, really easy. So if everyone can see what I'm doing there, I just put pleconnect.ca, and I hit Get Started. And hopefully you can see this cute little website frog thing that comes in, and it just says Start Building. And it shows you as you're doing it how your site looks. And hopefully folks can see that if they scroll around. But you can choose to do a list of your navigation or a matrix, and you can change the design. You can add your own custom colors and your own styles and so on. And you can kind of click within it to see how the various levels look, and you can change your background image and your headings. And when you're done, you save the site, and it produces like a URL that I guess they give you, and that's free. And then it shows you how to do a redirect. And then if you want to pay them every month to host it, there's more features. So again, I'm not endorsing this particular product. I just thought, oh my God, this was so easy. My site's in Drupal, and I was intimidated about, I didn't want to have to create like a parallel site. So I was just sort of experimenting with this, and I thought it was super easy to use. Perhaps people have experiences with something better, or they don't think they would need this. But for someone like me, I think, you know, I know some CSS and HTML, but I'm a little uncomfortable in the world of the source code. So I found this super helpful. And then you can preview it. I just wanted to show you the preview screen because perhaps even if you weren't interested in building a mobile site, you might want to find out how your site looks. So this is when you've built your little mobile site, you can put it into what looks like an iPhone there and a Windows phone and a BlackBerry. So again, it sort of does show you how your site looks and how links open and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of a tribute to MOSA and the folks at POVNet because your site looks, the PLE Connect site looks quite good in all of these without really doing anything to it. And I certainly needed to work a little bit harder on my site, Your Legal Rights, to make this work. But I found this very intuitive and easy and kind of cheap. It's only $9 a month to kind of have the full thing going on, but certainly this was interesting. I don't know if other people have experiences. I can stop sharing this and head back, but I just thought that might be an interesting tool. Does anyone have any comments or suggestions? I know we were told that that's certainly not good enough per se. You've got to really see how it works on the real phones, which I had a question about how you would ever do testing. If you're doing like a province-wide website and you want to see how it looks on mobile, I can't imagine how you could get everybody in the actual room with their pulling out their phones, and I was wondering if anyone has experience with that. There's some comments coming through from MOSA saying that the tool that I'm showing is cool. I'm glad she thinks so, but that the real mobile-friendly login page looks nice too. The reason that PLE Connect works well is because we've based it on an adaptive theme, so a Drupal theme already optimized. So I think that might have been why my site looked okay too without me doing much. So that gets to the point that I wanted to let MOSA speak to directly, if you don't mind, MOSA, which is how to build your site in the first place so that when you're ready to kind of do a mobile version, you're not starting from scratch. So these might be some things that we can all think about when we're developing a new site. Are you willing to talk about that for a second, MOSA? Can I put you on the spot?
Actually, if you don't mind, I might have an intro on this.
Oh, then Hubert, do you want the ball or do you just want to talk?
Well, you can give me the ball if you want. I'll share the. I just read this article on. Let me just share the application. Sorry. I just read an article on this where Adviso, they're a Montreal-based analytics experts, basically, and they just wrote this article. You can see the URL probably, but I could put it in the right board afterwards. But they're talking about optimizing your site for smartphones. And one of the points they're making, and I had a further discussion with them, is that depending on what you want to do, that's when you will go either for a mobile site, for a mobile app, or for an adaptive design or responsive design, they call it. They're highly recommending that if you only want to adapt the current website you have, is to go towards a responsive design because it's much better for referencing. This means generally that your the URLs will remain the same. This way, it's much better for referencing and for Google analytics purposes and stuff, and definitely for mobile referencing. There's all kinds of issues with it, so they're really highly recommending that you go for adaptive design or responsive design when you're building or when you're adapting your website. And it will go to the point that Mosa is going to make, I think, to how to, initially program it so that it has that design. Because their point is, if you want to do a specific app or a specific mobile site, it has to be something that's a project in itself that is not currently stuff that is on your own website, because then you're going to cannibalize basically your stats and your own website. So they're highly recommending this, and I don't know, Mosa, what's your point? What if you agree with them? But I think it's an excellent point to make too.
So if I can just, this is Fiona here, just trying to translate, not that you need a translation per se, more I do as not always knowing the lingo. So is the advice there to oversimplify the idea of, instead of creating what can usually be limited resources and time, instead of creating kind of like different apps for different phones necessarily, or creating like totally parallel versions of your website, you have to maintain both. The idea of like creating your website in the first place to adapt to the different applications and future technology, so trying to make it responsive per se, I guess, and taking advantage of HTML5. Perhaps, is that sort of what you guys are getting at? And if so, Mosa, could you talk a little bit more about that in ways that hopefully a lot of us can follow? Am I on the right track with what that article's about, Hubert?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Mosa?
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, right on. Yeah, so just saying, I mean, if you have a website that's been built in the last few years, likely it's already been built up to current web standards. So you're already working with a pretty good canvas for getting your website mobile. The idea is that your website's theme is likely controlled by a style sheet, so using CSS. And that's what that app that you showed us, Fiona, or sorry, that web page that you showed us, it was basically writing a bunch of code for you, some CSS, to make your website fit into a single column, to make your navigation fit onto the screen, and sort of to pull all your elements together. This is something you can also do using CSS, and you can actually just pile that right on top of your existing website CSS, and you can set it up so that depending on what size the screen is when somebody's visiting your website, they'll see a sort of different version of the same content. And yeah, the benefits are exactly what you said, Fiona, which is that you're not spreading yourself thin, taking care of more than one thing. Of course, if you're doing something specific like building an application to give tenants info sort of in a totally different interface that's separate from your website, then an app would be appropriate. But for a lot of people, they just want to show the same information on their website to users.
So would you say that if folks have used WordPress, for example, like a lot of people use a tool like that because it's so easy, that's probably why they first chose it. But if they use WordPress or something like Drupal, chances are, if it's a relatively recent version, that they're on the right track, that they don't have to start from scratch, that they've taken your advice without knowing it, so to speak?
It's very possible. There are a lot of starter themes out there that might not be mobile friendly, but what I will say is if you're using WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, and several other common content management systems, there are modules or plugins or extensions that you can use. You can install them for free on your website, and they'll take care of a lot of the optimization for you. So yeah, if you were using a WordPress site, you could go to the WordPress.org site and look up, I believe it's called Mobile Tools. And yeah, you would just basically install a plugin, configure a few settings, and off you go. Your site is more or less ready for mobile devices.
That's awesome. And so if we have developers where we made our site in Drupal, for example, and it looks pretty good when we do these testing things, but there's like little things with some of the formatting and that kind of thing, is that a question of perhaps your developer, or if you do it yourself, not all of us can do that, that where you go back to them and tell them to kind of like do some general adjustments instead of asking them to price creating a parallel version? And I guess not that you can answer the specifics, but it's kind of good to go back to your theme and kind of try to tinker with it?
Definitely, absolutely, and there's several good tutorials out there. on how to do that. So if you just Google make your website mobile friendly, for example, you'll come up with a whole bunch of web pages that are like, make your website mobile friendly in 10 minutes. What those are about are actually just including a very simple bit of code in your web page that says, if this person is using a mobile device, or viewing in a certain screen size, use this style sheet instead. And in fact, from what I've read and tried, even if you just attach a single style sheet with nothing in it, you're still resetting your browser to use mobile. And so it'll make your website look better even without doing any custom coding at all, really.
Oh, that's cool. And I'll just say that tool that I was showing you guys a minute ago, that free Duda mobile or whatever, it gives you the instructions on how to stick some code into the top of your index page that kind of sends people to that version, and it auto selects. And I know the folks in Law Society did, or sorry, the folks in BC did that themselves with creating the mobile version of their site.
Yeah.
That's
great.
But it
is really I'm sorry, Fiona. Yeah, it is really important if you're just looking at presenting a mobile version of your website to really think about not looking at using any sort of app tools. You know, really what you want to do is if you're using a content management system, you want to look at either starter themes that are already mobile friendly that you can build off of. And an example of that for Drupal would be Adaptive Theme. And if you're working with a website that's not using a CMS, but it's still using HTML5, then yeah, there's some very small tweaks that you can do to make it mobile friendly, and it's really cost effective, and it looks, it basically is compatible with the future. I don't know a better way to put it, but we don't know where these devices are going to go. So it's important to plan for it using a language that all browsers can read.
That's great, and such good advice for nonprofits with, you know, not reinventing the wheel if you can. That's great. I think we have a little more time, but I'm aware that some people probably have to leave like at the exact moment of 1:30. So we'll go back to the discussion and try and take some additional questions. But before, if people do have to leave right on time, first of all, our greatest thanks for joining us, and for all your great participation, sending links. I'm learning so much, and my head hurts, and I really appreciate it. Please sign up to PLE Connect to find out what we're doing next, and also there's a survey that's going to pop up when this ends. I hope it pops up, but if it doesn't, I'm going to bug you all again to do the survey and tell us how we could be better at this. Don't be shy, because we're learning as we go, and we really want to make these as useful as possible. So I think, according to my clock, we have 8 minutes left. So I just wanted to say that just in case people had to leave early. But other things that we were going to talk about today, QR codes. I don't know if we want to do a little demonstration of that. Perhaps I could call upon you folks to send a quick question through the chat or a comment on something in the remaining few minutes that you'd like to show or that you wish we could have a demonstration of. We all come at this from different levels of technical knowledge and know-how, so please don't be shy, and you might have something that you'd love to see a demonstration of. I think I'm going to put perhaps Brenda on the spot here to just say there's so many great URLs being shared here. I don't know, I'm sure people want a copy of this transcript, but perhaps we could, one of us or myself after this could make sure that I post all of the URLs that have been sent around to the PLE Connect website so that they're there all the time and we can go back and take a look at them. So that's my promise to you, but we also, the folks at Cortes Libraries BC are going to write up best practices, so some of this knowledge sharing is going to be captured, but some of these really specific articles that you guys are sharing, which are so great, I promise I will, next week, make sure by next week that they're all there in the PLE Connect website. Any other things that you were hoping to talk about? I know does anyone want to see sort of the QR code and how to use Google Analytics to add tracking code? And yeah, as Penny reminds us, let's keep using PLE Connect to keep the discussion going. Some of the best learning is when you start trying one of these tools and you run into a problem and you wish you could ask somebody, and we're the somebody. So hopefully we can all pick each other's brains and find out about this. So yeah, we're lots of great things being shared there in the chat. Okay, well, I don't know if anybody wants to do any other sort of show and tell stuff. We do have a discussion on QR codes in the PLE Connect website, and I found it very, very helpful. We just did one recently on a poster. It's sort of self-explanatory and really easy if you just Google QR code generation, how to do that, because it just you just makes a little funny looking image and you just put an URL on it. But what I found really helpful was the suggestion that you make a unique URL in Google Analytics specific to the URL for that, so that you know if anyone actually clicked on your poster with a funny little graphic on it, which I found really helpful. So the instructions on how to do that are already there if we don't have time to do that today. So if certainly I'm not against ending early, but if we have any other comments or questions. Yes, go ahead, Hubert.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention we've done it a few times here at Itzkalwa, and we've used addthis.com because that's what we use for URL shortening, and it automatically gives you a QR code that goes with it. So therefore, you can follow the statistics. It gives you a lot of info on addthis, bit.ly. bit.ly. Sorry, I was confusing. But it gives you definitely QR codes for each of the URLs you're shortening, and it gives you tons of statistics and stuff on it and where it was clicked and everything. So that's the one we use. I don't know much others, but it's very useful. We used it a few times.
Well, that's very helpful. I just did it through kind of the Google Analytics site, but I don't know if that, like I just went to the Google Analytics kind of help pages and they had information on how to do it. But perhaps the bit.ly one's easier, more user-friendly. It probably is, because sometimes the Google Analytics help pages can be like not helpful if you're not. They can be a little confusing. But I will definitely check that out next time. That's great. Penny makes the point that she's never actually seen anyone use them in public, which is kind of funny. But it sounds like the folks in Alberta who would have a poster on the table at youth conferences and stuff with one of those codes, that people would come over and instantly want to kind of scan it. So perhaps their use is on the rise. But anyway, there may be further comments that come through the chat, or people who may raise their hand or start unmuting themselves and start talking. But if not, once again, I would like to extend my gratitude and thanks to all of you, to our presenters for taking the time to prepare all this detail and to show us all the great work that they've done, both on the webinar, which again I really enjoyed re-listening to, because there was so much great stuff in there that I found it helpful. Even though I was there the first time, it was great to listen to it again. And to all of you for your great contributions. And we look forward to joining you all on the next mysterious Web Lab and webinar, because I don't know what it's going to be about yet, and we hope that you guys can tell us what you think it should be about, and we can carry on those discussions on the PLE Connect website. So, wow, aren't we a punctual bunch? To my clock, it's 1:30, so I think this might be a good time to sign off. And again, to ask you to fill in the survey. You will have to fill in, well, I shouldn't say you will have to. We hope and pray that you will fill in a survey for every webinar and web lab. So at the very top, you have to kind of choose the drop-down and pick the right one, and we'll make sure to keep entering the new ones into that survey. And let us know how you found the technology, how you found the facilitation, whether the topic was helpful, whether you learned anything, and very important, tell us about future webinar ideas. You can do that in the survey, but if you do it in the PLE Connect website, everybody can start discussing and debating which one we should cover. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you folks about what to do next. So on behalf of the project partners, I would like to thank you once again, and we'll stay tuned and see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.